Get ready, Staten Island.
The Ferry Hawks are back at SIUH Community Park, July 7th to the 12th for a 6-game series against the High Point Rockers. Wednesday, July 8th with first pitch at 6:30. It's Woo Wednesday in collaboration with the Wu-Tang Clan. The Ferry Hawks transform into the Shaolin Hawks. Thursday, July 9th, first pitch is at 6:30. It's Thirsty Thursday with $5 Bud and Bud Light drafts.
Visit ferryhawks.com now to lock in your seats. This is Cop Talk, talking crime, cases, and backing the blue. Now, here are your hosts, Captain Ed Mehmet and Detective Kevin Schroeder.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Cop Talk. I'm your host, and I'm here with my co-host today is David Giordano, retired NYPD, and also our guest today is GOP candidate for the New York State Attorney General's office, and her name is Saritha Komatireddy.
You got it.
Saritha, welcome.
Thank you very much.
And why don't you tell our audience, our listeners, your background?
Well, thanks so much for having me here today. It's really an honor for me to speak with folks in the law enforcement community. That really is a big part of my background. So I was a prosecutor for 12 years in the Eastern District of New York, U.S. Attorney's Office. And my focus there was terrorism. I went after leaders in Al-Qaeda and in ISIS. I worked very closely with the New York Joint Terrorism Task Force. I had the opportunity to work very closely with detectives from the NYPD, members of NYPD Intel, as well as federal agents and state police on those cases. And we tracked down terrorists around the world and prosecuted several in federal court in Brooklyn and made sure that they were held accountable for their crimes. And then I was asked to take over the narcotics unit. And so I worked with folks on the Organized Crime and Drug Enforcement Task Force, and I worked with the DEA and FBI and others to go after leaders in the drug cartels. Mm-hmm. So that was my work for 12 years here in New York.
Yeah. And where'd you grow up?
I was born in Brooklyn.
Okay.
My parents actually came to Brooklyn in the 1980s to get their medical training at Coney Island Hospital. So that's where we lived. My parents had a small place near Avenue Z in Coney Island. And we actually moved around the country growing up, but I always wanted to come back and make my life in New York. And so after I went to school, I went to college and law school at Harvard. And then I clerked for Justice Brett Kavanaugh when he was on the D.C. Circuit. And a few years later, I came back to Brooklyn to be a federal prosecutor.
So you first, you were assistant U.S. attorney.
That's right.
Okay. And now, never worked in a prosecutor's office, local, 5 boroughs, Manhattan, Brooklyn?
Not the DA's office. I went straight to being an assistant U.S. attorney.
Right up to assistant U.S. attorney general. Okay, great. Fantastic.
David. So I looked at Saritha's campaign ad on the internet. It's Saritha for AG. What a video. Professionally done. It wasn't an NYU video college class. Very, very impressed with that video.
Thank you. I have a very good team. They deserve all the credit for that.
Yeah, well, they did a fantastic job. It's interesting. In that video, you say that you would walk your kids to school and you feel threatened. And looking at your background, I said, when did she have time to walk kids to school? I mean, you were a busy woman, totally busy, but very impressive. I got a question regarding the New York AG's office. It seems as though you're, in many respects, overqualified. Our previous 4 AGs were dumbed down the office. You're going to be going into a nest of people that are embedded, entrenched in the AG's support. What would you do to clean up the AG's office and make it a spectacular, honest place that it once was?
I think New Yorkers deserve the very best lawyer to be their state's chief lawyer, the state's chief law enforcement officer. Mm-hmm. And in terms of making sure that office serves New Yorkers the highest quality, listen, there's folks in that office who I'm sure have been there for a long time. I've met people who have worked there very recently, worked for decades under different leadership, and faithfully did their jobs. As people in the law enforcement community, we know there are people who are career public servants. Most of us are not political. As an AUSA, as a federal prosecutor, I served under more than 10 U.S. attorneys, presidents of both parties, and I did my job. My job was to go after terrorists. I did that without fear or favor. And I think a lot of people do their job well without regard to politics. I'm sure there's a number of folks who fit that description in the AG's office. Obviously, we also know that we have an AG's office right now that is very political, that goes after people just because the AG doesn't like them, and that's wrong. It's not just that it's wrong. From a law enforcement perspective, it's unethical. That's not what we do. It is against our code of ethics. And that change just starts at the top. It starts with leadership. It starts with getting a new AG, someone who's a law enforcement professional, someone who's going to approach the job without regard to politics, who's going to treat everyone equally, and who's really going to protect every New Yorker in a fair and even way.
What's your thoughts on the governor wants all ICE agents, federal agents, to remove their masks while they're making arrests? What's your thoughts on that?
Listen, I think it's really important to make sure that everyone is safe in doing their jobs. And the problem right now in New York is that we have created a society where it's okay to assault law enforcement. We have a DA, for example, here in Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg, announced on his first day in office that he's not going to prosecute people who resist arrest. Now, we all know what that actually looks like when you're in the middle of an arrest and someone's resisting arrest. That essentially ends up in a scuffle. And that very quickly can devolve into an assault on law enforcement. But we've seen time and again that he just doesn't take action in those instances. And now we've created this culture, and that is part of this larger picture, which is a culture of allowing cops to be targeted without any consequences. And that puts cops in danger. It puts everyone in danger. We shouldn't allow that. There's no reason for that. You look at something like what happened just earlier this year in the winter when, we saw a video on social media of people taking, chunks of ice and stuffing it down the back of a cop's shirt. That's totally unacceptable. And to minimize that is also totally unacceptable. The reality is, if a regular person was just walking through the park and someone who's a stranger came up to him, rushed up to him and put ice down the back of their shirt, that person would feel violated, would feel assaulted, would call the police and say, hey, someone just assaulted me, and would expect a response. Well, it should be no different when the person is a police officer. We got to treat everyone equally. We can't treat law enforcement like second-class citizens.
Anyone can sell electronics. At Electronics Expo, they do more than sell products. They design, install, and support complete technology solutions. From home theaters and whole home audio to lighting, shades, automation, networking, security cameras, and premium entertainment systems. For over 22 years, they've helped thousands of homeowners experience technology at its very best. See the difference for yourself. Visit their Wayne or Paramus stores in New Jersey or shop now at electronicsexpo.com.
Well, we could start with compliance. When a uniform officer says you're under arrest, put your hands behind your back, comply. Because when you don't comply, that's resisting arrest, and that's where it escalates. And then, of course, the cop uses necessary. Everyone forgets you can use necessary force to effect an arrest. Okay, now you have police officers who are afraid to use necessary force, and then that's how a lot of our cops are being injured and severely, injured as well as possibly killed, because they're thinking twice. Oh, am I doing the right thing? Too many rules and regs. No, do what you have to do to effect that arrest because he should have complied or she should have complied. Period. That's how I feel. Yeah,
the objective is to reduce violence and to provide fairness and transparency, right? And our system provides that. You have the ability to contest an arrest. You have the ability to push back. You just have to do it in court, not on the street.
Exactly.
And that's how the rule of law works.
Right.
Listen, I litigated a lot of things. We went back and forth in court, made arguments about whether something was fair or right, whether evidence was seized lawfully or unlawfully. That's part of the process. A criminal defendant has those rights and should be able to exercise them. We just have to make sure we do it in a way that's safe, and our system is set up to allow that. The problem right now is we've created this culture where they're trying to sort that out on the street, and that's bad for everybody.
Well, it is, in my opinion, it is expanded, Kevin, from Saritha, from the uniformed cop on the street to now it's the special agents, the federal special agents are bearing the same brunt of disrespect from the people that they're trying to apprehend. You know, the bad guy is like, well, listen, I can get away with this with a cop, so he's a special agent. What's the difference? You know, they're gonna keep pushing the envelope until someone does time in jail.
Yeah, I mean, and also as we know, there's paid professional protesters. Mm-hmm. Okay, I think in Newark they were protesting against the ICE facility out there, the federal facility out there where they were holding some immigrants, illegal immigrants, and I think maybe 75% of the people arrested out there weren't even from New Jersey or New York. They were from Wyoming, wherever else. So they're being paid. Mm-hmm. They're being flown in to start trouble. You know, and that's another problem as well. Yeah, it's we do have a great justice system, but unfortunately, nothing's really being enforced with the DAs we have here in New York City, and we could go up to the state as well with the Attorney General prosecuting the case. She's not prosecuting the cases she should be prosecuting. She's going, like you said, outside the box just to be politically, you know, incorrect as far as I'm concerned.
Well, the reality of the way she runs that office is, you know, the Attorney General's office has 700 assistant attorneys general. It's actually basically one of the largest law firms in New York. It's bigger than Skadden. And it's the second largest AG's office in the country. Now, out of that 700, a fraction, less than 100, are assigned to prosecute crime. And many of those attorneys are assigned to prosecute cops, part of their OSI division. Mm-hmm. So we basically have an Attorney General who's structured the place around her priorities. She targets cops more than criminals. That's something we can change on day one. Yeah. We will change on day one. We have to make sure that the AG's office aligns with the priorities of New Yorkers. New Yorkers care about crime. Crime is up 26% under Letitia James. And I'm going to go in there. You asked me about how we rearrange that office. We make sure that 350 people out of 700, half the office, is assigned to prosecute crime. And we do that in a couple of ways. One, we go in to places like Manhattan where the DA has announced that he's not going to prosecute certain categories of crime, and we say, all right, we're going to override you. We'll do it at the state level. And other areas in the state, you know, I've been traveling around the state over the last 6 months talking to DAs and sheriffs and members of the law enforcement community, police chiefs, and there's lots of areas where they're trying to do the right thing. They just need more resources. They need help. And several people have told me, well, you know what? The Attorney General's office just isn't a player in this space. They're not present. Sometimes we reach out, ask for help. We get declination letters, or we just don't get the help that we need. We need to have an Attorney General who plays the part of Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the state. That's the role. And that means if a DA needs help, you can actually designate, under New York law, you can designate AAGs, Assistant Attorneys General, as special ADAs and have them report to a DA and help that office out for as long as needed, so that they can get their community in a better spot, you know, and basically be deploying additional resources as the state needs it. That's what an Attorney General who's focused on crime can do.
That's pretty good. So let's turn to U.S. versus Al-Farek. Did I say that right?
That's right.
Al-Farek. You prosecuted that case?
I did. I was part of a team that went after that particular defendant. He was a U.S. citizen who had radicalized. He went to the Fatah area, which is the mountainous region between Pakistan and Afghanistan, and joined Al-Qaeda. He ended up becoming the head of external operations for Al-Qaeda, which is the segment in Al-Qaeda that plans attacks in the West. And ultimately, he was identified as the man who made a bomb that was deployed to wipe out a U.S. military base in Afghanistan. What ended up happening is the military. The case was really fascinating. Actually, what happened? There were two trucks. They were driving towards the gates of this base, and the military sentry, who I had a chance to interview and who testified at trial, the sentry saw that this was a hostile attack. They were able to take out the drivers of the trucks. The first truck, in fact, did detonate. It was a smaller explosion, and it created a crater. It was supposed to create the opportunity for the second truck to drive into the base and be in the center of the base, but they were able to stop the truck. And then they had a bomb tech, the guy from Hurt Locker, that guy. They had a bomb tech go in and actually take apart the bomb, deactivate it, take apart the pieces. And when they did that, and they unwrapped the brown packing tape around the bomb, they found fingerprints on that tape. And those were the fingerprints of the man that we took to trial. So on September 12th, 2017, I won't ever forget that, because the opening statement was actually supposed to be on September 11th, and we moved it out of respect for the day. So on September 12th, 2017, I gave the opening statement in that criminal trial, which happened in federal court in Brooklyn. And a jury looked at all the evidence. They saw the fingerprints, they saw the tape, they heard from the witnesses, and they convicted him on all counts of providing material support to Al-Qaeda, conspiring to murder Americans, and he's now serving a federal sentence in maximum security prison.
He was one of the pictures in your video, right?
He was.
Yeah, okay. It was him. So he was a U.S. citizen. Now, how and when did he become a U.S. citizen? Where did he come from? How did he wind up getting his citizenship? Do you have any recollection of that? Or?
Yeah, he was born in the United States.
Oh, he was?
He
okay.
was. And he ended up going to school in Canada. A couple of his friends from school testified at trial as well about his journey and what they thought was the evidence of his radicalization. Mm-hmm. We had evidence that he had watched some of the online propaganda that Al-Qaeda had been putting out, had visited some of the websites where there was additional calls for jihad and violence. And that was the path that he went down. He chose to go down. And there were witnesses at trial who identified him as having physically been in Pakistan and Afghanistan and in Al-Qaeda training camps.
Is he the one that got 45 years?
That's right.
45 years. Where is he spending that time? In Colorado?
In Colorado.
Okay. Good.
So how's the campaign going?
Well, the campaign's going very well. Thank you for asking. We launched our campaign on December 1.
Okay.
And I have to say, it has been an incredible journey going around New York State. New York State has 62 counties. We've been to nearly all of them. And we've talked to folks all across the spectrum. As I mentioned before, we've been doing law enforcement roundtables with sheriffs and police chiefs. I've met with a number of members of law enforcement. I've met with people in the community. I've gone to fairs and parades and car shows, just talked to folks about what's going on in their communities. And the problems that we see here in New York City, they're problems across the state. Right. Crime, homelessness, a real concern about fraud and corruption in our government. Those are things that bother every New Yorker. And these are not 50-50 issues. These are 80-20 issues. People want crime to go down. Every county has a story of a repeat offender who's out on the street who shouldn't be there. Everyone's heard that. Mm-hmm. It's almost expected now. Mm-hmm. And they're disheartened by it. You see all these different areas, car thefts are up. They've doubled under Tish James. Mm-hmm. I had a sheriff tell me that he caught a guy who stole 13 cars in 21 days. And then when he caught him, the guy just said, give him my ticket, give him my desk appearance ticket, and let me go. Even the criminals know nothing's going to happen to them. Retail theft. Mm-hmm. I've had police officers tell me that they arrest someone in the morning for stealing from a store. They're still doing the paperwork. The guy gets released. He comes back on a second arrest before the paperwork's done on the first one. And then it happens again a third time on the same day. They're seeing this every day, not once in a while, every day.
Throughout the state.
Yeah, in many, many areas of the state. Drug deaths are devastating communities. Young kids, getting poisoned by fentanyl. These are the things that everyone's seeing. And the homeless and mentally ill who are on our streets, that's a real problem. We are not providing real solutions. We're not getting these people treatment and help and job training. We're just either letting them out on the street or paying for them to be to have stays at hotels and motels that don't help them get on their feet. It's just a place that, and taxpayer money, tens of billions of dollars of taxpayer money is going out the door to things that aren't real solutions.
Why is this chaos happening throughout the state?
Well, we don't have an attorney general who actually addresses these issues. Right? We have an attorney general right now in Letitia James. She's not a law enforcement officer. She's a partisan politician. She uses our taxpayer money and the resources of that office to pursue personal vendettas. She's not focusing on the issues that New Yorkers are actually dealing with every day. A rise in crime. Crime's gone up 26% under her watch. A rise in drug deaths. It's gone up 63%. A rise in homelessness, which has gone up 38%. She doesn't do anything about those issues. And that's why there's actually so much potential for change. If you have a new attorney general who's a law enforcement professional, who cares about people being safe and is going to use the resources of the office to make them safer, we're going to be able to make New York safer. We're also going to be able to make New York less expensive. All these crimes I'm talking about, they cost us, right? When car thefts double, car insurance goes up.
That's right.
When retail theft happens, our businesses are losing money. We're paying more. Those of us who actually pay for goods are paying the price for those who don't. We see this crime. We're paying a crime tax. All of us are. And if we can get crime under control, then it's going to make New York much more livable.
Saritha, what's the status on the allegations that were against her in regards to falsifying documents for a mortgage somewhere down south? Was it Virginia? Was it Carolina?
One of the Carolinas.
Yeah. Any idea where that case is going?
You know, last I heard, Department of Justice is still looking into it, and it's under investigation. I trust my former colleagues at DOJ to follow the facts, follow the law. Let's see where that goes.
Yeah. Right. How are you being received upstate when you venture up to the upper counties? Is your message getting out up there? Are you just talking to law enforcement? Are you talking to community groups as well?
I'm talking to everyone, and, you know, it is well received. You know, one of the things that struck me, I drove about 5 hours to Watkins Glen, New York, a couple of weekends ago. I took my kids. We went down Main Street, talked to folks, small business owners, down Main Street and chatted with people. And Watkins Glen is just beautiful. It's this area with wineries and waterfalls. And so I was talking to them, asking them about what are the things that they consider a burden? What would they like fixed? Expecting to hear more about taxes and insurance, which, you know, by the way, the Attorney General can do a lot about. If you prosecute fraud, then you're going to bring billions of dollars back to taxpayers instead of taking it away. You don't need to raise taxes. We just need to prosecute fraud and get the stuff that's being stolen from us back. And, you know, insurance costs are going up partly because of crime, because when you have crime and you have a lot of regulation that's unnecessary, it makes everything harder to insure. I was expecting to speak more about those issues. And I had someone pull me aside and say, listen, I don't want you to get the idea that just because we're a small town and it's really beautiful up here, that crime's not a problem. Crime's still a problem because we see people coming in off the interstate, off the thruway, and they're stealing in our town and then leaving. We're actually importing crime in some of these upstate communities in New York. Because criminals from out of state know that they can come to New York, steal from New Yorkers, and even if they get caught, they're going to get released in an hour. Yep. So all of these places are being victimized.
And they're facilitating that through our interstate system.
Saritha, have you sat down with any of our 5 NYPD police unions?
You know, I've had a lot of very productive conversations. I'm sitting down with unions across the state. And so I had a conversation yesterday with, not with the city, with another county. And we are going to be sitting down with the folks of the NYPD as well. But, you know, I was standing right beside Scott Monroe in the Public Safety Alliance when they announced the HALO law. And, you know, it's very, very important to have an attorney general who backs the blue, who supports law enforcement, and I'll be that person.
Yeah, it's a great thing, the coalition. that Scott Monroe has started. It's great. It's going in the right direction.
Yeah.
Over 500,000 voters.
That's right. He said that, and I thought it was very striking. It's the law enforcement community. If we all make our voice heard,
Right.
it's over 500,000
Yes.
votes. And I think it's more important than ever to make our voice heard now. I mean, for folks like us, you've been officers for longer than I was a prosecutor, but even in my more than decade as a prosecutor, I saw the change. I saw where it went from we're the good guys to we're the bad guys. And that all happened in 2019 and 2020. And I'll tell you, when I was in the office, I looked at it and I thought, okay, this defund the police thing, it's a fringe movement. It's probably going to blow over. This is just a phase. Let's just write it out. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, it never did, right? It's gotten worse and worse. They passed laws that were very pro-criminal policies that help criminals get out of jail, and in many cases unjustly, and that don't provide accountability for victims of crime. And they never fixed them. Mm-hmm. There are easy fixes for them, but they never fixed them. And that's how we have cashless bail, catch and release, raise the age, the HALT Act. We have laws that allow people to commit crimes and not face consequences. And this is part of the reason I decided last year to leave federal service and run for state attorney general, because unless we stand up and say, okay, enough is enough, we need to come back to common sense, we need to come back to enforcing the laws and supporting law enforcement, unless we do it and make our voice heard, it's not going to change.
Right.
And that 500,000 votes, it's incredibly important. Mm-hmm. And this November presents us with a very unique opportunity to all say in unison, enough is enough.
Mm-hmm. Right.
They took the indemnification away from the NYPD a couple of years ago. And is there anything you would do as an attorney general to try to get that back for the cop on the beat?
Yeah. Well, tell me more about it first.
Okay. We were indemnified by the city if there was an allegation of abusive force or something like that. So now many of the police officers have to through the unions have insurance, right? So we're no longer being indemnified. A cop can lose his house if he is found to be guilty of something. Are you aware of that? Were you aware of that?
Yeah, I'm aware of the issue generally, but I wanted to understand a little bit more of the details of what your specific question is about.
Yeah.
I mean, here's my concern. I'll tell you my concern overall, and I think a lot of these things feed into each other. Mm-hmm. Right now, law enforcement officers in New York are being targeted in ways that are just we haven't seen before. Mm-hmm. And so part of the problem is, one, that they're being targeted, and two, that they're not being protected, and that those who are actually serving the public and putting their lives on the line for the public aren't getting the support that they need. I think you have to fix each aspect of that. Mm-hmm. What I mean by that is, so I'll give you an example. In some of my conversations, I've had people tell me, police chiefs tell me, that they've gotten a call from the AG's office saying, hey, every time one of your guys goes out and responds to a 911 call, let's say someone's having a heart attack or they're overdosing, and you try to give them CPR or naloxone, you try to revive them, but it doesn't work. The person unfortunately passes away. We're now going to investigate that as a death in custody investigation. That's unprecedented. That kind of scope, literally investigating every possible action, that's someone who's an officer is trying to help resuscitate someone, and if it doesn't work out, is going to be investigated by the state attorney general in a death in custody investigation, creates a whole another level of liability that didn't exist a couple of years ago. So I think we can actually relieve a lot of the pressure in terms of the indemnification costs by making sure that we have appropriate levels of jurisdiction and not jurisdiction that's too broad on the investigations in the first place. Does that make sense?
It does. I wanted to just get back to some of your qualifications. Can you touch upon the Deepwater Horizon oil spill? Can you give us a thumbnail version of what occurred?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
You want to know what happened in the oil spill? Or what I did?
What you did, your role in it.
Well, so 2010, April 2010,
That's right.
the Deepwater Horizon exploded. 11 people lost their lives in that explosion. And the rig, in the destruction of the rig, what happened is that the actual oil well was left open, and so gallons and gallons of oil gushed into the Gulf. And it was just an extraordinary tragedy. And the loss of human life was truly sad. So I joined the staff of the Presidential Commission on the BP oil spill and offshore drilling. And my job, I was part of the fact-finding team.
Okay.
So my job was to investigate the cause of the spill and understand what was going on. We started that task while the spill was still ongoing. And so the facts were still developing, but people wanted answers, understandably. It was a terrible, terrible tragedy that happened. And so me and a team of my colleagues, we interviewed witnesses. We flew out to the sister rig of the Deepwater Horizon, the Deepwater Nautilus. We interviewed rig workers. We talked to engineers at the major companies. We had hearings. I had the chance to work with real professionals and learn a lot from the industry and from workers and from scientists and professors of offshore drilling, and just get a real handle on what went wrong. And the reality was, in that case, and this was all laid out in a report that we published, there was not enough redundancy. So deepwater drilling is an extraordinary feat. It's almost as complicated as space science, except we're going down instead of up. And the technology they've developed to do it, it also involves a lot of risks. And people who are on rigs, workers on rigs, take a lot of risk doing those jobs because you have this highly flammable material that is gushing up from the earth, and they're trying to keep it under control. And there are supposed to be 3 ways to keep it under control. This is the thumbnail version. One is when a well is being sort of left static, one way to keep the oil and gas in the earth until you're ready to bring it up is to put cement at the bottom of the well. A second way is to fill the well with something heavier than the oil and gas. They call it mud. It's barite mix. But you're supposed to fill the well with enough so that it counterbalances the pressure of the oil and gas. And a third is called a blowout preventer, which is a mechanical device at the top of the well that in case the hydrocarbons come up, you can close it. The blades are supposed to be strong enough to stop the hydrocarbons from rising up further. In the BP disaster, all 3 of those failed. The cement did not set up. It did not harden properly, and so it failed to contain the oil and gas. The mud was not sufficiently heavy. They had taken some of it out. So it didn't push down enough to counterbalance the pressure that was pushing up. And the blowout preventer, the reality was that the oil and gas shot up so quickly that it was already above the blowout preventer by the time they were able to close it.
Yeah.
And then when they were closing it, the blades didn't close perfectly because it was already shooting up. It was too late. So all 3 of those, what they call barriers, failed. And that's why you had this terrible tragedy where all of a sudden there was a blowout. Oil and gas is spewing onto this rig, and all it takes is one spark. We think it was a spark from the engine room to ignite the whole thing, and the rig exploded.
So, Saritha, with the 25th anniversary of 9/11 coming about, will you be attending any down at the Memorial Ground Zero? Will you be down there?
Of course. The 25th anniversary, every anniversary of 9/11, I always take a moment, obviously, to observe what happened that day. I will never forget where I was. I'm sure the same is true of every New Yorker. For me, 9/11 happened my first week of college. It very much shaped what I did with my career. Before 9/11, I was planning to be a doctor, like my parents. And after, I felt I needed to do something to fight terrorism. And that is ultimately what led me to law school. And every year on 9/11, I take a moment and I rewatch the news coverage of that morning, which I will never forget, and honor all of the people who lost their lives on that day, and the heroes who are commemorated in Pennsylvania who took their fate into their own hands to save others.
Right. Well, we say never forget, but unfortunately, too many people have forgotten already.
Well, I think it's our job to remind them. I mean, it's not. I don't see how it's possible in New York, of all places, to forget. So many people here, not just lost their lives on that day, but so many first responders, law enforcement officers, sacrifice their own health to try to help bring people out of the rubble, and they still live with the lasting effects of that. And I just don't see how it's possible to forget.
That day, as we know, 3,000 people lost their lives, including, of course, first responders. But also since that day, probably has tripled that number. And unfortunately, it's a number that keeps growing. So, but I want to thank you for being our guest today. And any last words? Can you let our audience know where they could volunteer, donate, get involved with your campaign?
Of course, yes. So my website is saritha4newyork.com. So it's Saritha for New York, all spelled out, .com. You can learn more about me there. You can contribute to the campaign. You can sign up to volunteer. You can join our Law Enforcement for Saritha coalition. We'd love to have you be a part of our campaign in whatever way that you can. But we are really, listen, this election is an incredibly important moment in New York. It's incredibly important. We have an array of views before us, but we now have elected politicians in New York who believe that there should be no police, that there should be no prisons, and who mean it when they say that. It's not something that was a flippant remark a long time ago. And we need to take that threat seriously. We also need to understand that most New Yorkers don't believe that. And I see this. I talk to voters every single day. Most New Yorkers, they do support law enforcement. They want the laws enforced. They're just the silent majority, and we need to make sure the silent majority finds its voice. That means getting out to vote and making sure that your friends and family get out to vote. It's time to bring common sense back to law enforcement at the state level, and we can do that by putting a prosecutor in as Attorney General.
Dave?
Oh, no, it was great meeting you again. And I hope we see you again in the near future, maybe at a golf outing or two.
Thank you very much.
All right.
I'm sure we'll see you out there. So once again, everyone, our guests, get ready for Komatireddy. Saritha Komatireddy running for New York State Attorney General. And we wish you all the luck, and I'm sure we'll see you real soon. Until next time, I'd like to thank everyone for listening. And if you like what you hear, you can subscribe to Cop Talk on WBC Radio at Cop Talk. And also, God bless you, God bless America, God bless law enforcement throughout the country, and God bless our U.S. military. Until next time, thank you.